Have you ever wondered how some people always seem to get what they want? Whether it's landing that big deal, getting that promotion, or even just convincing someone to see things from their point of view, there's a secret behind it. It's not magic. It's not luck. It's something we all have the power to learn and apply. It's called persuasion. Picture this. You're sitting at a coffee shop talking to someone. They just made a point that's got you thinking. But then, almost like magic, they say something that shifts your perspective completely. It's like they've read your mind. It's a feeling of trust, understanding, and influence, all wrapped into one conversation. That's persuasion at work. But here's the thing. Persuasion isn't about tricking or manipulating people. It's not about getting someone to do something against their will. It's about understanding human nature, speaking the right language, and presenting ideas in ways that others can't help but align with. Imagine if you could do that. What if you could walk into a room, any room, and leave a lasting impression? What if you could make people feel comfortable, heard, and understood, while also guiding them toward the outcome you want? That's the magic of persuasion. Now, let me ask you this. What if I told you that persuasion isn't something you're born with? It's not just for the naturally charismatic or the people who love being the center of attention. Anyone can become a master of persuasion. You don't need to be an extrovert, and you certainly don't need to be manipulative. You just need to understand a few key principles that govern how we think, feel, and make decisions. We all have a powerful tool at our disposal, our words. Think about it. Words shape our thoughts, influence our emotions, and direct our actions. We all have conversations daily, but how often do we stop to think about how our words can create connection, inspire action, or even change someone's mind? Whether you're negotiating a deal, trying to convince your friends to try a new restaurant, or even trying to get your kids to do their chores, persuasion is everywhere. The key is in learning how to use those words effectively, not to manipulate, but to connect and influence in ways that benefit both parties. One of the most powerful tools of persuasion is understanding the human mind. When you speak to someone's emotions, rather than just their logic, you tap into a deeper level of influence. People make decisions based on emotion, not just rational thought. Ever heard of the term gut feeling? That's the emotional brain making decisions, often before the logical brain even has a chance to process. So, when you're speaking to someone, how are you connecting with their emotions? Are you speaking to what matters to them, or just presenting a list of facts and figures? Let's dive a little deeper into that. Imagine you're in a negotiation. You're trying to convince someone to make a deal with you. Instead of starting by presenting all the numbers and stats, what if you started by painting a picture? What if you talk about the benefits of this deal, not just in terms of numbers, but in terms of how it will make their life easier or better? People don't always care about the details at first. They care about how it makes them feel. That's the emotional connection you're aiming for. Think of it like this. Have you ever bought something you didn't need, or that you didn't fully understand the use for, but the way it was presented just made it irresistible? A lot of times, it's not about the product itself. It's how it was sold to you. It was the emotional appeal, the way the salesperson made you feel like you needed it, even if you didn't know it at the time. And here's something crucial. Persuasion isn't just about speaking. It's also about listening. You might think that persuasion is all about getting your message across, but in reality, it's just as much about hearing what the other person is saying. Active listening is key to understanding their needs, desires, and concerns. When you truly listen, you gain insight into what drives their decisions, what their fears might be, and where you can find common ground. Imagine you're having a conversation, and instead of focusing on what you're going to say next, you truly focus on what the other person is saying. You don't interrupt. You don't jump in with your opinion right away. Instead, you ask questions that show you're engaged, interested, and willing to understand their perspective. This is where the magic happens. When people feel heard, they're more likely to be open to what you have to say because they trust you more, and trust is the foundation of persuasion. Now, let's talk about one of the most important aspects of persuasion: authenticity. It's easy to think that persuasion is about being a smooth talker or using fancy words, but at its core, real persuasion is about being genuine. If you're trying to convince someone of something, but they sense that you're not being authentic, they'll shut down faster than you can say, sales pitch. Authenticity builds trust, and trust builds persuasion. When people feel that you're being true to yourself, they'll be more willing to listen to what you have to say. Have you ever had a conversation with someone who was so genuine and real, you couldn't help but listen to them? Maybe it wasn't even because of what they were saying, but because of how they were saying it. They were confident in their beliefs, but not pushy. They didn't try to convince you at every turn. They just shared their perspective, and somehow you saw things their way. That's authenticity in action. Here's the thing. Persuasion is an art, but it's also a skill that can be learned. It doesn't happen overnight, and it certainly doesn't happen by following a set of manipulative tactics. It happens when you build trust, connect emotionally, and speak with authenticity. And once you start mastering these elements, you'll find that persuasion doesn't feel like a trick. It feels like a natural, powerful way of communicating. Now, imagine having these skills at your disposal. Imagine walking into any room, any conversation, and knowing that you have the ability to guide the discussion, influence the outcome, and build genuine connections. That's not just power, that's mastery. And the best part? Anyone can learn it. You don't need to be born with some magical charm. You just need to be willing to practice, be patient, and continuously improve. So, let me leave you with this. The next time you find yourself in a conversation, take a moment to think about how you can apply the principles of persuasion. How can you listen more deeply? How can you speak with more authenticity? How can you connect with the other person's emotions and needs? The answer might surprise you, because when you master the art of persuasion, you're not just changing minds, you're changing lives. And that's the real power of persuasion. Have you ever been in a conversation where you just knew you were about to lose? Maybe it was during a heated discussion with a friend, or maybe it was during an argument with a co-worker about an idea or a decision that really mattered to you. You got all the facts, all the logic, all the reasoning. Yet, somehow, the other person's view is starting to seem more appealing. They're not even necessarily smarter or more prepared than you. They just know how to influence. They know how to persuade. And in those moments, as frustrating as it is, there's something powerful happening. Something we can all learn from. The art of persuasion is about understanding the psychology of people and what truly drives them. People don't always make decisions based purely on logic. Emotions, biases, past experiences, and even body language play huge roles. Once you understand this, you'll start seeing how deeply persuasion is rooted in human nature and how you can use that knowledge to your advantage. Think about a time when you walked into a room and someone immediately won you over. Not necessarily with what they said, but with how they made you feel. It's like the first time you meet someone, and within moments, you feel comfortable around them. Maybe they smiled warmly, asked about your day, or just made you feel heard. They didn't need to make a big presentation or use flashy words. They simply tapped into your emotions, and before you knew it, you were on the same page. That's the power of connection. That's the power of understanding human psychology. So, how can this work for you? The first thing to recognize is that people are driven by more than just logic. They're driven by emotions. Don't get me wrong, logic plays a part, but emotions have an undeniable influence on our decisions. You probably heard someone say, "I just had a gut feeling about it," or "it just felt right." That's emotion guiding their decision-making. Imagine you're sitting across from a potential client, and you spent hours preparing the perfect pitch. You've got all the numbers, all the statistics, and the perfect solution to their problem. But then, when you begin speaking, you notice they're not paying attention. Their eyes are glazed over. They're fiddling with their pen or checking their phone. What went wrong? You got everything they need logically. So why are they not on board? Here's the truth. You skipped the emotional connection. You walked straight into the facts and figures, missing the emotional connection that could make them care about what you were saying. When people are emotionally engaged, they're more likely to remember what you say and be persuaded by it. That's because emotions play a huge role in how people evaluate situations and make decisions. If you appeal to their emotions first, the logic will have a much stronger impact. Let's say you're trying to persuade someone to take a risk. If you only present them with data, they might feel uneasy. The numbers may make sense, but the risk is still emotional. They might not want to take the chance. Now, what if you start by talking about how the potential opportunity could change their life, how it could give them a new level of freedom or security? By connecting to their feelings, you help them see beyond the numbers and feel more comfortable with the risk. But it's not all about feelings. People also make decisions based on biases. That's part human nature, too. We all have biases, some conscious and some not so conscious. These biases influence everything, from our preferences to our judgments and decisions. Think about the last time you picked a restaurant to eat at. Chances are you chose somewhere you already know or somewhere you've seen advertised a lot. You weren't necessarily choosing the best food. You were influenced by what you've exposed to, what felt familiar. For example, you walk into a store to buy a pair of shoes. One pair looks shiny and new, and the other looks a bit worn. If you're like most people, you'd probably choose a shiny new pair, even if you know they'll get worn out soon. Why? Because we often assume that new is better, that it's a sign of quality. That's a status quo bias. We lean toward things that are familiar or new simply because they feel comfortable. Understanding these biases is a game changer in persuasion. If you know someone is dealing with a loss aversion bias, meaning they fear losses more than they value gains, you can frame your message in a way that emphasizes what they stand to lose if they don't act. You can show them that by doing nothing, they're missing out. On the flip side, if someone has a confirmation bias, you can align your ideas with what they already believe or value, making it easier for them to see the validity in your perspective. Now, let's talk about one of the most powerful aspects of human psychology: social proof. Have you ever noticed how much easier it is to make decisions when others around you are doing the same thing? That's the social proof effect. Humans are social creatures. We tend to look at what others are doing to guide our own decisions, especially when we're uncertain. This is why reviews and testimonials are such a powerful part of persuasion. When you see that 5-star review from a stranger who had the same concerns you do, it's like a little voice in your head saying, if they liked it, maybe I will too. In real life, social proof can work wonders. Think about the last time you were at a crowded restaurant. You might have noticed that the more people there were, the more likely you were to think, this must be good. You probably felt more confident in your choice, even though you hadn't tried the food yet. That's social proof in action. It's not about thinking things through. It's about trusting the crowd. Now, imagine you're trying to persuade someone about something. Maybe it's an idea, a product, or even your perspective on a complex issue. Instead of overwhelming them with facts or logic, start by showing them how others are already involved. Show them that other people, who are similar to them, have already made the decision or chosen the path you're suggesting. This taps into a powerful psychological trigger that makes people feel more comfortable following the crowd. You see, understanding persuasion is not about being a con artist or manipulating people. It's about knowing human nature, tapping into what makes people tick, and guiding them toward the choices that align with their needs, wants, and emotions. Once you understand these psychological triggers, you'll see that persuasion is less about convincing someone to do something and more about helping them make a decision that feels right to them. And once you begin using these techniques, you won't just be changing others' minds. You'll be changing your own approach to life, relationships, and your own success. In the end, mastering persuasion is about understanding people, not just ideas. The more you know about what drives their decisions, the easier it will be for you to connect, engage, and ultimately persuade. This skill can be the difference between just getting by in life and truly influencing the world around you. You've heard it before, right? People buy from people they trust. But what does that really mean? What makes someone trustworthy? What makes us, as humans, decide that we feel comfortable listening to someone or even taking action based on what they say? Trust is a funny thing. It's intangible, yet it's one of the most powerful drivers in human interaction. Imagine this scenario. You're sitting in a room with a person you've just met. They've got the facts, they've got the right credentials, but you're still not entirely convinced. You want to listen, you want to trust them, but something is off. There's a lack of connection. Maybe the way they're speaking, maybe the energy they're giving off, maybe their body language just isn't aligning with the message they're trying to communicate. You might not even be able to put your finger on it, but there's a sense that they're not entirely genuine. Now, flip the script. You meet someone new, and immediately there's a sense of ease. You feel comfortable with them from the moment they introduce themselves. You trust them, even if it's just the start of your relationship. You listen to their ideas more carefully because you feel like they're looking out for your best interests, that they understand where you're coming from, and they're not just trying to sell you something. How does that happen? That, my friend, is the magic of rapport. Rapport is the foundation of any meaningful relationship, whether it's personal or professional. It's the unspoken connection that makes communication flow effortlessly. It's not just about exchanging words. It's about creating a feeling of mutual understanding, a sense that you're on the same wavelength. I want you to picture a moment in your life when you felt an instant connection with someone. Maybe it was a friend, a colleague, or even a stranger you spoke to for a few minutes. What made it click? What allowed you to feel like you were understood and, in turn, trust that person? Was it their body language? The way they listened? The way they asked questions that made you feel valued? More often than not, it's all of these things coming together. Now, let's talk about how you can build rapport with anyone, whether you're trying to persuade them or just connect on a deeper level. One of the most powerful tools in building rapport is mirroring. I know, it might sound a little weird, but it works. Think about it. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and they crossed their arms or leaned forward in a certain way, and instinctively you did the same thing? Mirroring is a natural tendency we have to unconsciously mimic the behavior of the person we're interacting with. It's a subtle way of saying, I'm with you, I'm on your team, and I understand you. But you can use this to your advantage. When you're talking to someone and you subtly match their body language, without being creepy, of course, it creates a subconscious feeling of familiarity. People like people who are similar to them. So this mirroring creates a bond that goes deeper than words. It's about aligning your energy with theirs, allowing them to feel like you're in tune with them. Another key factor in building rapport is active listening. And when I say active, I don't just mean hearing the words they're saying. I mean truly engaging with what they're saying. When you listen actively, you're not thinking about what you're going to say next or waiting for your turn to speak. You're genuinely absorbing their words, noticing their tone, their pauses, and even their body language. You're showing them that what they say matters to you. This is where we often fail in conversations. We're so focused on our own thoughts, our next point, or what we want to express that we don't fully listen to the other person. But when you focus entirely on them, when you reflect back what they're saying or ask thoughtful questions, it creates a deep sense of connection. They feel heard, understood, and valued. That's the essence of rapport, creating a space where both people feel like their needs, thoughts, and emotions matter. Let me give you an example. A while ago, I was talking to a friend who was telling me about a recent project at work. I could tell she was feeling a bit stressed, but I didn't just rush in with advice or offer solutions right away. Instead, I paused and asked her more about the challenges she was facing. I repeated a few things she said in my own words to show I understood. And then, without her realizing it, we were both leaning into the conversation, comfortable in that space. It wasn't just about the words. It was about the connection we built by listening deeply and reflecting her concerns back to her. That made her feel safe opening up to me. But listen, building rapport is not just about listening or body language. It's also about authenticity. People can spot a fake from a mile away. If you're only trying to create rapport to get something out of the other person, they'll feel that. Authenticity is key to creating a meaningful, lasting connection. If you're being genuine in your approach, people will respond. You can't fake it. But when you truly care about the conversation, when you genuinely want to connect and help, that's when the magic happens. That's when people start feeling like they can trust you. Building rapport also requires empathy. Empathy is not just about feeling sorry for someone. It's about putting yourself in their shoes, understanding their feelings, and recognizing their emotional state. If someone is stressed, anxious, or frustrated, understanding where they're coming from allows you to speak to their emotional state and find ways to address their concerns. Empathy isn't about solving their problems. It's about showing that you understand them and their needs. So here's the thing. Rapport isn't just a technique. It's the foundation of all human relationships. Whether you're trying to persuade someone to take a new direction, convince them of a product's value, or simply have a meaningful conversation. Rapport is a bridge that allows for trust, understanding, and connection. Once you build rapport, everything becomes easier. The flow of the conversation becomes natural. The barriers come down, and you're both on the same page. You don't have to force anything. The connection just happens. Next time you're about to enter a conversation, whether it's personal or professional, think about how you can build rapport. Focus on how you listen, how you respond, and how you make the other person feel. When you do that, persuasion becomes so much easier. And ultimately, that's how you become someone people trust, because they feel heard, understood, and valued. And once they trust you, persuasion is no longer something you do to them. It's something you do with them. Absolutely. I'll make sure there are no unnecessary gaps in the next chapter. Let's continue with Chapter 4. Have you ever noticed how some people are simply magnetic? You meet them and instantly feel like you've known them forever. You want to listen to them. You want to be around them. It's not that they're saying anything particularly extraordinary, but there's something about the way they communicate that draws you in. It's like they have this invisible power to connect with others. And it's not just about what they say. It's about how they make you feel. Now, picture this. You're sitting in a meeting at work. The conversation is going back and forth. And then someone speaks. Suddenly, everyone stops and all eyes are on them. You might not even realize it, but there's something about the way they speak, the tone of their voice, the words they use, and how they make others feel. That's the power of effective communication. It's not just about talking. It's about connecting on a deeper level and making people feel what you're saying. When it comes to persuasion, communication is everything. But here's the key. It's not just about talking. It's about listening, reading the room, understanding emotions, and adapting. Persuasion isn't a one-way street where you bombard someone with your ideas. It's a dance. It's about finding that perfect rhythm of speaking, listening, and responding to what's happening in the moment. Let's take a deeper dive into active listening. I know we've all heard about listening, but when you hear active listening, what does it really mean? Active listening is about being fully present in the conversation, engaging with the other person's words, and responding in a way that shows you truly understand them. It's not just about hearing their words. It's about understanding their message, the emotion behind it, and what they truly want to convey. Think of it like this. You're not just processing words. You're connecting with the person. Imagine a conversation where someone is sharing something personal with you, maybe a challenge they're facing or a frustration they have. They're telling you all the details, but instead of just nodding and saying, you actively engage with them. You ask clarifying questions, reflect back their feelings, and let them know you understand where they're coming from. That's powerful. Here's a real-life example. A friend of mine was talking about her struggle with a difficult project at work. She felt overwhelmed and was frustrated because she felt unsupported. Instead of offering advice right away, I paused and really listened to what she was saying. I acknowledged how she felt and asked about the specific challenges she was facing. In doing this, I wasn't just hearing her words. I was connecting with her feelings. As a result, the conversation flowed better, and by the end, she felt heard and validated. That's the kind of communication that builds trust and rapport. Now, let's talk about how body language plays a role in communication. Have you ever noticed how someone's posture or the way they stand can totally change the energy in a room? Think about the last time you were in a meeting or a social setting. Did you notice the way people's body language affected how you felt? Maybe someone was slouched in their chair, arms crossed, and it made you feel like they weren't really interested in the conversation. Or maybe someone was sitting up straight, leaning in slightly and making eye contact, which made you feel like they were fully engaged. Body language speaks volumes, and it's something you can use to your advantage when trying to persuade. Here's the thing. When you're speaking to someone, your body language needs to align with your words. If you're telling someone you're confident, but your arms are crossed and you're avoiding eye contact, they're not going to believe you. Body language can contradict your words and send mixed signals. So what does that mean for you? It means being mindful of how you present yourself, especially when you're trying to persuade or make an impression. Standing tall, making appropriate eye contact, and using open gestures all help to convey confidence and trustworthiness. Let's take this a step further. Communication isn't just about what you say or how you say it. It's about the energy you bring to the table. Think about a time when you met someone new and their energy just felt right. Maybe they were enthusiastic, positive, and excited to engage with you, and that made you feel more comfortable around them. Now, think about someone who was flat, distant, or seemed disengaged. Their energy likely made you feel disconnected, right? The energy you bring into a room can either draw people toward you or push them away. It's a subtle undercurrent that influences how others perceive you, and it plays a massive role in persuasion. When you walk into a conversation, try to be conscious of your own energy. Are you coming across as open, confident, and positive? Or are you unknowingly closing yourself off and making it harder for others to connect with you? Here's another key part of communication: clarity and simplicity. In a world where we're constantly bombarded with information, the ability to communicate clearly and concisely is more important than ever. Think about the last time you were in a conversation where someone rambled on and on. How much of what they said do you actually remember? Probably not much, right? That's because when communication isn't clear or focused, it's easy to lose interest or become overwhelmed. On the other hand, when someone speaks with clarity, when they get straight to the point, express their ideas in simple terms, and avoid overcomplicating things, it's much easier to follow and understand. Persuasion becomes so much more powerful when your message is simple and to the point. People don't have time to sift through jargon or complicated explanations. They want to know exactly what you're offering and how it benefits them. Let's go back to that meeting scenario. Imagine you just been asked to present a proposal, but instead of diving into long-winded details or confusing data-heavy pitch, you simply explain the main points, focusing on the benefits and outcomes that matter most. You speak clearly, confidently, and with purpose. In that moment, you're not just persuading them to agree with your proposal. You're building credibility and trust. You're showing that you respect their time and that you value clear communication. Now, let's talk about asking the right questions. When you're having a conversation, especially when you're trying to persuade, questions are your secret weapon. Asking the right questions helps you uncover what the other person truly needs or wants. It gives you the opportunity to better understand their perspective, which is crucial for building rapport and guiding them toward a decision. It's not just about asking questions for the sake of asking. It's about asking questions that provoke thought, reveal hidden concerns, and lead the conversation in the right direction. Think of it like this. Instead of jumping straight into presenting your solution, ask questions that help the other person reflect on their own needs or pain points. You might ask, how would it feel if you could resolve this challenge? Or what's the most important thing to you in this situation? These questions guide the conversation and make the other person think about what matters to them, helping you tailor your message to their specific needs. Effective communication isn't a skill that happens overnight. It's something you develop over time by practicing, being mindful, and learning from each interaction. It's about connecting with others, understanding their needs, and speaking in a way that resonates with them. And when you can communicate clearly, confidently, and empathetically, you can persuade in ways that feel natural and authentic, creating deeper connections and lasting influence. Next time you're in a conversation, think about how you can communicate more effectively. Are you listening actively? Are you engaging with the other person's body language? Are you speaking clearly and concisely? The more you practice these techniques, the more powerful your ability to persuade will become. Communication, after all, is not just about what you say. It's about how you make others feel. And when you get that right, persuasion becomes an effortless art. If you want to be a master of persuasion, you need to understand one of the most powerful principles of human behavior: reciprocity. You probably heard it before, but do you really understand just how deeply it influences people's decisions? At its core, reciprocity is a simple idea. People feel obliged to return favors. When someone does something for us, we feel this natural inclination to return the favor. It's wired into us, a part of human nature that dates back to the very beginning of human civilization. Think back to a time when someone did something kind for you. Maybe it was a small gesture, like holding the door open, or something bigger, like helping you out when you were in a tough spot. How did you feel? There was probably a sense of gratitude, right? But what happened next? Did you, at some point, Feel like you wanted to return the favor? Maybe you didn't do it right away, but there was a sense that you needed to repay that kindness. It's almost automatic. This dynamic is powerful, and it doesn't just apply to personal situations. It can be a game changer in the world of persuasion and influence. In fact, when you understand and leverage the principle of reciprocity, you can make the process of persuading others feel completely natural and effortless. Let's break it down a bit further. Imagine you're at a business meeting, trying to get a client on board with your proposal. You got all the facts, all the logic, and all the figures, but something's missing. They're hesitant, unsure, not quite ready to commit. Instead of continuing to push your product or service, what if you offered something of value first? Maybe you provide a free trial, a valuable insight into their industry, or even a helpful resource related to their business needs. It's a simple gesture, but by offering them something valuable, you've triggered the principle of reciprocity. Now, they feel an unspoken pressure to return the favor. They might not consciously realize it, but they're far more likely to respond positively to your proposal because they feel like they owe you something. This is reciprocity in action, and it works because it's built into the way we operate as humans. It's not manipulative. It's just the way we've been hardwired over thousands of years to build trust and cooperation. I've seen this principle in action countless times. One of the best examples comes from a time when I was at a networking event. Everyone was trying to make connections, pitch ideas, and exchange business cards, but one person stood out. Instead of immediately diving into what they could offer or how they could help me, they started by genuinely offering assistance. They shared a piece of valuable advice, one I hadn't thought of before, and it wasn't just fluff. It was something I could immediately use. They didn't ask for anything in return, but I felt this immediate sense of gratitude toward them. And later, when they mentioned their business or asked if I could help them in some way, I was much more inclined to say yes. It wasn't just because they were being nice. It was because they had triggered that internal feeling of reciprocity. They had given first, and naturally, I felt compelled to return the favor. This is where reciprocity can be extremely powerful in persuasion. It's not about giving something to get something. It's about establishing a dynamic where both parties benefit. Think about how this can apply in your own life. Whether you're trying to persuade someone to take action, agree with your viewpoint, or support your project, offering something first sets the stage for a more positive, mutually beneficial relationship. But there's something important to note here. The key is to give without expectation. If you give with the mindset of, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine, it can come across as transactional rather than genuine. People can sense when a gesture is being made for selfish gain, and that can actually harm your efforts. Genuine act of kindness and generosity go a long way in establishing trust and, ultimately, persuasion. The trick is to give with sincerity, not with the expectation of immediate return. And that's when the principle of reciprocity will work in your favor in the most powerful way. Let's look at an example of reciprocity in a more everyday situation. Think about your friends or family. Have you ever noticed that when one person does something for another, whether it's cooking a meal, offering a ride, or even just lending a hand with a chore, the other person is often more willing to offer help in return? It's this cycle of kindness that keeps the connection strong and ensures that no one feels like they're taking advantage of the other. This dynamic is at play in every relationship, and it's powerful because when you offer help, it isn't just a simple gesture. It's an invitation for a deeper bond to form. People are social creatures, and we naturally want to reciprocate the actions of those who help us. Whether we're consciously aware of it or not, the principle of reciprocity works behind the scenes, guiding us towards stronger, more meaningful interactions. But here's the thing. Reciprocity isn't just limited to physical acts of kindness. It can also extend to things like emotional generosity. Have you ever had someone give you a sincere compliment, and then, without even realizing it, you feel compelled to compliment them back? Or maybe you've been in a conversation where someone shares something vulnerable with you, and you feel an urge to reciprocate with your own story. That's emotional reciprocity at work. People often feel the need to reciprocate, not just in terms of physical acts, but emotionally as well. So, when you're trying to persuade or influence someone, it's just as important to offer emotional support, encouragement, and empathy as it is to offer tangible favors. So, how can you apply this principle in your own life? The next time you're in a conversation, consider how you can add value first. Maybe it's offering advice, providing a helpful resource, or just lending a listening ear. By giving first, without expecting anything in return, you'll build goodwill, trust, and a sense of reciprocity that can make future interactions much smoother. And when you need something in return, whether it's a favor, support, or simply their agreement, they'll be more inclined to help you because they'll feel that sense of obligation to reciprocate. Reciprocity is one of the most natural, human-driven forces in persuasion. It's not about trying to manipulate anyone. It's about building relationships that are based on mutual respect and understanding. It's about giving without expecting, but knowing that when you offer something valuable, it will come back to you in ways that can benefit both you and the other person. The best part is that once you understand this principle and start applying it, persuasion becomes a seamless, effortless process. You're no longer forcing someone to agree with you. You're simply creating an environment where they feel naturally inclined to support your ideas, reciprocating the value you've given. That's the magic of reciprocity. And once you start using it, you'll notice a shift in how people respond to you. They'll trust you more, respect you more, and be far more likely to say yes when you need them to. So, when you step into your next interaction, remember this. Give first. Offer help, share value, and show kindness. You'll find that the more you give, the more people will feel inclined to. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a choice, but you just couldn't decide? Maybe you were at a restaurant, staring at the menu, and you were stuck between two options that seemed equally appealing. Or maybe it was a bigger decision, like choosing between two job offers or deciding whether to move to a new city. The options seem to be at a standstill, and it's hard to choose the right one. But what happens when there's a third option added to the mix? Suddenly, the decision seems clearer, doesn't it? That's the power of the principle of contrast. When it comes to persuasion, this principle is a game changer. It's one of those little psychological tricks that we use all the time, whether we realize it or not. Simply put, the principle of contrast involves making two things appear more different when compared side by side, even if they're not as different as they first seem. It's the art of comparison, of creating a difference that helps people see one option as the obvious choice. Let's break this down with a real-life example. Imagine you're in a store looking to buy a new jacket. The first one you see is a simple, plain jacket. It's nice, but nothing special, kind of average in terms of style and price. You try it on and you think, this will do. But then as you continue browsing, you spot a jacket that's way more expensive. It's high-end designer, and it's got all these extra features. You hesitate at first, the price tag a little daunting. But then you realize something. The first jacket, though nice, suddenly seems cheap in comparison. That plain, average jacket doesn't seem nearly as appealing when compared to the more luxurious option. Even though the plain jacket hasn't changed in quality or design, its value has decreased in your mind because of comparison. This is contrast at work. By introducing that more expensive jacket into the mix, your perception of the first jacket has completely changed. You're now seeing it in a different light, not necessarily because it's any worse, but because it's now being measured against something better. This psychological phenomenon happens all the time, and it's a powerful tool in persuasion. But here's the thing. The principle of contrast doesn't just apply to products or prices. It's an incredibly useful technique in almost any persuasive situation, whether you're negotiating, convincing someone to take action, or simply trying to highlight the value of your own ideas. Let's take a look at how this principle can help in more personal, everyday situations. Imagine you're negotiating for a new job, and you've been given a salary offer. Now, you could just accept the offer right away, but here's where the principle of contrast comes in. If you've already done your research and you know that similar roles in the industry pay a bit higher, you can use that information strategically. You could mention that other companies are offering more competitive salaries, but that your main priority is finding a position that offers both growth and fair compensation. By introducing the higher salary offers into the conversation, you're making your current offer seem less appealing in comparison, even though it may have seemed like a good deal at first. Suddenly, the hiring manager is more inclined to offer you a higher salary because they see it in contrast with what other companies are paying for similar roles. It's not about being aggressive or pushy. It's about showing that there's room for improvement and creating a sense of urgency or value by making the options feel more different when placed side by side. Let's take another example. You're selling a service to a client, and you know that there are cheaper options out there. Now, you could simply highlight all the benefits of your service and hope that your pitch will be enough. But what if you framed it differently? What if you introduced the cheaper options first, explaining how they lack certain features or don't offer the same level of quality as your service? By doing this, you're not only making your service seem like the better deal, you're making it stand out as the obvious choice when compared to the alternatives. Your client will see the value in what you're offering, simply because it's now measured against something less desirable. This is a common tactic in sales and marketing, but it can be just as effective in everyday conversations. The principle of contrast is a way of guiding decisions by framing the options, making one appear far more appealing in comparison to the other. But let's not stop there. Think about the decoy effect, a concept closely related to the principle of contrast. The decoy effect is when a less desirable option is introduced into the mix, not to be chosen, but to make other options seem better. Here's an example. A movie theater offers 3 ticket options. Option 1 is a basic ticket for $10. Option 2 is a premium ticket for $18. And option 3 is a super premium ticket for $20. But it's almost identical to the $18 one. The $20 ticket doesn't really offer anything new. It's just a decoy. But when people see that $20 ticket, they're more likely to purchase the $18 premium ticket because it now seems like a better deal. It's not about the $20 ticket itself. It's about how it changes the perception of the $18 ticket. You can use this in negotiations, in sales, and even in everyday decision-making. By introducing a decoy, you subtly guide people to choose the option that benefits you. Now, let's get personal for a moment. Think about your own life. How often do you compare your situation to others? Maybe you're scrolling through social media, seeing friends posting about their vacations, new cars, or accomplishments. Suddenly, you might feel like your own achievements or life experiences don't measure up. That's contrast at play. Your own situation seems less appealing in comparison to someone else's highlight reel. But here's the thing. While contrast can make us feel less confident or satisfied with what we have, it can also be used as a tool to lift our perspective. What if, instead of comparing yourself to someone else, you use contrast to remind yourself of the value you bring to the table? What if you stop looking at someone else's success as a measure of your own worth, and instead use the principle of contrast to see your progress in a more positive light? For example, let's say you're working on a project, and things aren't moving as quickly as you'd like. You could focus on how far you have to go, but why not focus on how much progress you've already made? When you contrast your current achievements with where you started, suddenly everything looks more impressive. The principle of contrast is incredibly powerful because it taps into how we naturally perceive differences. People don't always see things in isolation. They compare them. And by strategically introducing alternatives or setting up comparisons, you can guide people's decisions in your favor. Whether you're in sales, trying to influence a friend, or even making decisions for yourself, contrast can be a tool that changes everything. But remember, it's not about tricking anyone or manipulating the situation. It's about guiding the perspective. When used ethically, contrast can make the world of difference in persuasion, helping you frame choices in a way that leads to better, more confident decisions. So, next time you're faced with a choice or try and persuade someone, remember this simple principle. Comparison is everything. And when you understand how to create contrast, you can make your options stand out in ways that feel natural, effective, and persuasive. Absolutely. Let's continue to the next chapter. Here we go. Have you ever heard someone say, "I'll believe it when I see it"? It's a pretty common expression, right? But in reality, when it comes to persuasion, seeing as believing isn't the full picture. What if I told you that people often believe in what they hear, or, more specifically, in what they are told by others? That's where social proof comes in. Social proof is one of the most powerful and underappreciated tools in the world of persuasion. Simply put, it's the psychological phenomenon where people assume the actions of others reflect the correct behavior for a given situation. It's like when you walk into a restaurant and see that it's packed with people, while the one next door is practically empty. Without even thinking about it, you might be more inclined to choose the crowded one. Why? Because in your mind, the crowd serves as evidence that the food is good. You're using the choices of others to inform your own decision. This is social proof at work. Your brain is taking shortcuts, relying on behavior of others as a guide. Now, let's break it down even more, because this concept is a game changer in how you think about influencing people. Understanding how to harness the power of social proof can make all the difference when you're trying to persuade or lead others. Think about the last time you made a major purchase. Maybe it was a new phone, a piece of furniture, or even just a product online. What did you do before pulling the trigger? More than likely, you looked at the reviews, right? You probably checked out the ratings, and if you're like most people, you might have even read through a few customer comments to get a sense of whether it's worth your money. Another powerful example of social proof comes from peer pressure, a form of social influence that we've all experienced, especially in our younger years. But here's the interesting thing. Peer pressure doesn't just apply to kids or teenagers. As adults, we are still influenced by the behaviors of those around us. Whether it's a group of friends encouraging you to take a trip, colleagues pushing you to join in on a new business venture, or even social media influencers influencing your purchasing habits, peer pressure is still a huge force in our decision-making. The key to understanding social proof is realizing that we as humans are hardwired to follow the crowd. If we see others doing something, we often feel more comfortable doing it ourselves. But here's where things get interesting. The influence of social proof becomes even stronger when the people we're looking to as examples are similar to us. This is called similarity in social proof, and it's incredibly powerful. If you see someone like you, whether in terms of profession, age, or interests, doing something and getting good results, you're far more likely to follow their lead. Let's talk about social media for a second, because it's one of the most obvious examples of social proof today. Have you ever bought something because a celebrity endorsed it, or because it was trending on Instagram? Maybe you saw a post from someone you admire, and it made you think, if they're using this, maybe I should try it too. This is social proof at its finest. Whether it's the number of followers someone has or the number of likes on a post, we're influenced by the actions of others. It's why influencers and online reviews are so powerful in today's world. But here's a deeper insight. Social proof doesn't just apply to big influencers or celebrities. You don't need to be famous to use this principle to your advantage. Whether you're building a business, a network, or a personal brand, the endorsement of just a few trusted individuals or the proof of a successful track record can go a long way in making others believe in you. Now, let's think about how we can use this principle ethically. The key is to focus on providing authentic, positive social proof that truly add value. In business, for instance, you don't want to create fake reviews or endorsements just to persuade people. That'll backfire. Instead, focus on gathering genuine testimonials, case studies, and success stories that highlight the positive impact your product, service, or idea has had on others. Let real people speak on your behalf. In your personal life, you can use social proof by surrounding yourself with positive influences and seeking out groups or communities where people encourage growth and success. Being in an environment that supports your goals and values can provide you with the social proof you need to achieve success. In the end, social proof is one of the most powerful tools at your disposal when it comes to persuasion. It taps into our natural desire to fit in and be part of something bigger than ourselves. People like to know that their decisions are backed by the wisdom and behavior of others. Whether you're persuading someone to buy into your idea, take action, or simply agree with your viewpoint, leveraging social proof can make your message far more persuasive. So, the next time you need to persuade someone, whether in a professional setting, a social setting, or even in your personal life, remember the power of social proof. By showing that others are already on board, you'll be tapping into one of the most effective psychological principles in the world. It's not about selling an idea. It's about showing that the idea has already been embraced, making it the obvious choice for others to follow. Absolutely. Let's move forward to the next chapter. Here we go. Have you ever had one of those moments where you feel like you made a decision, but then you second-guess yourself? You think, did I make the right choice? It's normal to feel uncertainty, especially when there's a lot on the line. But What if I told you that the commitment and consistency principle is one of the most powerful forces that can help you make your decisions feel more natural and less uncertain? This principle is rooted in human psychology, and it's one of the most useful techniques when it comes to persuasion. To put it simply, the commitment and consistency principle is all about the idea that once people make a choice or commit to a course of action, they are more likely to stick with it. It's like this internal pressure we feel to act consistently with the commitments we've made, even if the situation changes. This can be a superpower when used ethically, not just for influencing others, but for influencing yourself as well. Let's take a real-life example to see this principle in action. Think about the last time you signed up for something, whether it was a gym membership, a subscription service, or a charity donation. What happened? At the time, it probably seemed like a good idea. But once the commitment was made, whether it was financial or emotional, you felt this internal drive to continue with it, right? Even when it got hard to stick to or when enthusiasm wore off, you felt this pull to keep going because you'd already committed. This is exactly what businesses tap into when they offer free trials or low commitment options to their customers. Ever signed up for a free trial of a product and then suddenly felt like you had to buy it after the trial period ended? Why? Because you made the initial commitment, and the principle of consistency pushes you to follow through on it. You've already invested, and now you feel like you need to be consistent with that initial decision, even if it's not the most logical choice. This principle works because, as human beings, we hate cognitive dissonance, the uncomfortable feeling that arises when our actions and beliefs are inconsistent. When you commit to something, there's a part of you that wants to align your behavior with that commitment. It's this drive to avoid conflict within ourselves that makes us stick to our decisions. And the more public the commitment is, the stronger that pressure becomes. Think about it. Have you ever made a public commitment to do something? Maybe you posted on social media about a goal you were going to achieve, like running a marathon or quitting smoking. Once it's out there for everyone to see, you feel this obligation to follow through, not just because you want to, but because it's now public. The more people know about your commitment, the more you feel the pressure to stay consistent with it. It's a powerful tool in persuasion and can be used strategically when you're trying to influence others. But let's not just look at this from the perspective of being persuaded by others. The commitment and consistency principle is equally powerful when it comes to self-persuasion. Have you ever set a goal, told yourself you were going to stick with it, and then found that your commitment carried you through even when things got tough? That's the principle in action. It's about building habits, creating momentum, and making decisions that feel aligned with your values, goals, and commitments. Once you've committed to a course of action, whether it's exercising daily or finishing a big project at work, that internal pressure to remain consistent can help you push through moments of doubt or procrastination. Here's a simple example. Let's say you're working on a long-term project and you committed to working on it every day for 30 minutes. After a few days, you might feel tired, unmotivated, or distracted by other tasks. But because you've made that commitment, whether it's to yourself or to others, you find it easier to push through. Why? Because your brain wants to stay consistent with the initial commitment you made. It's like an internal accountability partner that keeps you on track. Now, let's see how this principle can be used to influence others, especially when you're trying to persuade or guide them. In sales and marketing, the principle of commitment and consistency is used strategically. For instance, many businesses start by getting customers to make a small commitment. They might ask for something as simple as an email sign-up or a small purchase. Once people commit to that small action, they are more likely to continue with larger purchases or make more significant commitments down the road. This works because of the pressure to remain consistent with their initial decision. Think about a charity you might donate to. Often, they'll ask for a small, low-risk donation first. Once you commit to giving that small amount, the next time they ask for more, you're more likely to say yes, because you've already committed to supporting them. The same principle applies to everything from signing petitions to agreeing to a meeting. Small commitments lead to bigger ones. But here's the thing. It's not just about what people commit to. It's about how they commit. The more actively involved someone is in the commitment process, the stronger the effect. This is why you're more likely to stick to a goal you've written down or one that you discuss with others. Public commitments are incredibly powerful because they create accountability. When you say something out loud or when you take concrete steps toward a goal, you're more likely to follow through because you made it known to others and you feel that internal pull to be consistent with your word. Let's talk about another strategy that can be incredibly effective when it comes to influencing others, getting a small, initial commitment. This is called the foot in the door technique. It's about getting someone to agree to a small request first, with a goal of getting them to agree to a larger request later. This is one of the most powerful ways to build momentum. Whether you're trying to persuade a client to buy your service, get your kids to help out around the house, or convince a friend to join you on an adventure. Imagine you're trying to get a colleague to help you with a project. Instead of asking for a huge favor right away, start by asking them to review a small part of your work. Once they agree to that, it's much easier to ask them for more help. They've already made a commitment, and now they're more likely to follow through because of the principle of consistency. It's all about starting small and building up. The commitment and consistency principle is a quiet but powerful force in how we make decisions and interact with others. Whether we're convincing ourselves to stick to our goals or persuading others to follow a certain path, this principle shapes how we behave and how we influence those around us. When you learn to use it effectively, you can guide yourself and others toward better, more consistent actions. But the key is to remember that genuine commitments are what truly make the difference. When you commit to something, whether it's a personal goal or an idea you're sharing with someone else, make sure it's something that aligns with your values. People are more likely to stay consistent with their choices when those choices feel authentic and true to who they are. And that's when the power of commitment becomes truly effective. Not just for persuasion, but for building trust, confidence, and lasting influence. The next time you're looking to persuade or influence someone, or even just looking to keep yourself on track, think about how you can leverage the commitment and consistency principle. It's not about pushing someone into a decision. It's about guiding them to make choices they're naturally inclined to follow through on. And when you do that, you'll unlock one of the most powerful forces in human behavior, helping you to influence both yourself and others with ease. We've all been in situations where someone has tried to convince us to act a certain way or make a specific decision, right? But have you ever felt a deep resistance to something, even though logically it made sense? Maybe it was a sales pitch, a suggestion from a friend, or even a new idea at work that everyone else seemed to embrace. The idea made sense on paper, yet something inside you pushed back. Why does that happen? Here's the answer: the principle of scarcity. When people sense that something is in limited supply, they are far more likely to want it. It taps into a deep, primal fear we all share, the fear of missing out, or FOMO. It's the idea that something valuable could slip through your fingers if you don't act fast enough. Whether we realize it or not, scarcity can be one of the most powerful forces in influencing our behavior. But why? What makes it so effective? The principle of scarcity is rooted in the psychology of supply and demand. Think about it this way. When we see something as scarce or rare, we tend to assign more value to it. If you were in a store and saw a product labeled, "Only 3 left in stock," how would you feel? Chances are you'd feel a little rush of urgency. You might even tell yourself, "I better get this now before it's gone." It's not necessarily that the product is more valuable in terms of quality. It's that the perceived scarcity of the item makes it more desirable. The thought of losing out on something gives it more perceived value than it would otherwise have. This principle is something businesses have been using for years. Limited time offers, countdown timers on websites, while supplies last promotions. They all capitalize on this idea of scarcity to encourage quick decision-making. And it works. Studies show that when people are told something is limited in availability, they're far more likely to act quickly to obtain it. But scarcity isn't just something that happens in business or marketing. It's something that affects how we make decisions in all aspects of our lives. Think about dating, for example. Have you ever noticed that people tend to desire someone more when they perceive that person as being out of their league or harder to get? It's not necessarily that the person is more attractive or is more valued than others. It's that the perceived scarcity makes them seem more desirable. The idea that someone could be taken or unattainable makes them all the more attractive, doesn't it? It's the same reason why a new job, once it's offered to you, feels even more enticing when you know other candidates are competing for it. That scarcity of opportunity drives you to act. You're motivated to make decisions quicker, and sometimes even with less rational thought, simply because the opportunity might slip away if you don't seize it. Here's where things get interesting. Scarcity doesn't just apply to tangible things. It applies to experiences, time, and even attention. Think about the last time you were hanging out with a friend or family member, and they seemed too available. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. But haven't you also experienced that feeling where you just crave their attention a little more when they were harder to reach, or when they had less time to give? It's that same principle. When something or someone is perceived as scarce, we value it more, often without even realizing it. This is powerful when you're trying to persuade someone to do something. The moment you introduce the idea that something is scarce, whether it's your time, attention, a product, or an opportunity, the perceived value increases. It triggers a need to act now, to make a decision before it's too late. Let's say you're trying to get someone to commit to an idea you've been pitching, whether it's a business project or a personal plan. Instead of presenting it as something that's always going to be available, you could create urgency by framing it as a limited time opportunity. Maybe it's a special offer that expires soon, or maybe it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. By framing your idea or offer in the context of scarcity, you make it feel like something that must be acted on immediately. And when people feel that pressure of missing out, they're far more likely to act in your favor. But here's a critical point. Scarcity must be real. The scarcity needs to be authentic. If people feel that you're artificially inflating the rarity of something, they'll catch on, and it can backfire. People have become savvy to marketing tricks, so you have to be careful when applying this principle. Make sure that the scarcity you're offering is genuine and not just a sales tactic designed to manipulate. Take the example of a flash sale. Many companies use flash sales to increase urgency and persuade customers to make a quick purchase. But imagine if that flash sale happened every week or wasn't actually as limited as it was advertised. Eventually, people would stop feeling the urgency because they'd realize the scarcity was a strategy, not a reality. The principle only works when people feel like they're genuinely at risk of missing out. Scarcity also plays a massive role in the world of social media and content creation. Think about how often you hear about a limited release of an album, a viral challenge, or even a special live stream event that only happens once. It's no accident that these events are marketed as being rare. When something is scarce, whether it's content, an experience, or access to something exclusive, people flock to it. The idea that something could be gone at any moment motivates them to participate, engage, and consume it while it's still available. Now, here's the twist. Scarcity doesn't just affect what we buy or do. It can also influence what we believe. For instance, if a piece of information is framed as exclusive, we tend to value it more, regardless of whether it's really that important. This is often used in advertising, politics, and even in social circles. Think about the last time someone whispered something exclusive or secret to you. What was your response? You probably felt like you were getting something others didn't have, and that in itself increased the value of the information. Scarcity works because it taps into our primal instincts. The idea that something could be taken away from us makes us take action. It makes us value things more, whether it's an object, an opportunity, or even an experience. The fear of missing out triggers us to act quickly, often without as much deliberation as we would otherwise have. So, how do you apply this to persuasion in your own life? Think about the opportunities around you. What can you frame as scarce? Is there something you're offering that you can position as a limited time chance? Maybe it's a business opportunity or a personal project you're working on. You can create a sense of urgency by highlighting how rare and valuable the opportunity is, making the decision to act now feel almost like an instinctive need. But always remember, the scarcity must be real. People are not easily fooled, and genuine scarcity is much more effective than a manufactured one. The next time you're trying to persuade someone, think about how you can use the principle of scarcity to make them feel like the opportunity to act is limited, valuable, and too good to miss. In the end, scarcity is a force that taps directly into our emotions. When we think something is in short supply, it naturally becomes more desirable. Whether it's in marketing, personal goals, or even relationships, creating a sense of scarcity, while staying authentic, can be one of the most effective ways to persuade others to act quickly and decisively. We all have a natural inclination to want things that others value, right? Think about it. Have you ever walked past a crowded cafe or restaurant only to feel like you absolutely need to check it out? Or maybe you've seen a colleague get recognized for their work, and suddenly you feel a drive to prove yourself in the same way. We all want to be part of something bigger, something that others are already invested in. Because in our minds, that's where true value lies. This is a principle of social proof, and it's one of the most powerful forces in shaping our decisions. What makes social proof so effective? At its core, it taps into the desire to belong. We, as humans, are social creatures. From the moment we're born, we rely on others to guide our understanding of the world. When we see others doing something, we interpret that as a signal that it's the right thing to do. The more people are involved, the more likely we are to follow their lead. It's the same reason why we buy things that are trending or take part in activities that everyone seems to be doing. Social proof tells us that if others value something, it must be worth valuing ourselves. Let me share an example with you. Have you ever been in a room full of people, and there's one person who just seems to have everyone's attention? They might not be the loudest or the most outgoing, but they're somehow magnetic. People listen to them, take their advice, and follow their lead. Why? Because that person has social proof. Maybe they have experience, they've proven their worth, or simply put, they're recognized by others as someone who knows what they're talking about. Think about it. If you were looking for advice on a particular topic and had the choice between two people, one of whom had no credentials or social recognition, and one who had a following or a track record, who would you be more likely to trust? It's natural to gravitate toward the one with social proof. People are drawn to those who are already validated by others. Social proof acts as a shortcut, making decisions easier, especially when we're unsure. But social proof is not just something that happens in big, dramatic situations. It affects the small decisions we make every day, too. Take online shopping, for example. How often do you check the reviews before purchasing something? Do you find yourself looking for ratings, comments, or feedback from other buyers? When you see hundreds of positive reviews, you automatically think, this product must be good. But why do we rely on others' opinions so much? Because social proof is in play. The opinions of others help us feel more confident in our choices. If others are happy with it, then it's likely that we'll be too. And it's not just about large-scale purchases. Social proof can affect the smallest of actions. For example, if you're at a social gathering and you notice a group laughing over a joke or conversation, what do? It's likely that you join in on the laughter, even if you don't fully understand the joke. Why? Because social proof tells you that others found it funny, so you should too. But social proof can also work in reverse. If something lacks social proof, we tend to dismiss it. Imagine you're walking down the street and see two food trucks. One has a long line of people waiting, and the other is nearly empty. Which one are you more likely to approach? Naturally, you'd probably go for the one with the crowd. The line itself is a form of social proof. The more people who are participating in something, the more likely we are to believe that it's worthwhile. Even though the trucks might be offering similar food, the perception of value comes from the crowd's involvement. The same concept applies to ideas, movements, and causes. The more people you see supporting something, the more likely you are to join in, even if you don't fully understand the reason behind it. The sheer number of people is enough to convince us that it's worth our time. Now, let's consider how you can use the power of social proof to influence others. Whether you're trying to get people to support a new idea, buy a product, or take action, social proof can be one of your most powerful allies. Imagine you're promoting a new service, and you just launched it. You don't have a massive client base yet, but you can show potential clients that a handful of early adopters have already signed up and left positive feedback. That small but visible group of satisfied customers can act as social proof, and it will encourage others to get on board. One of the most effective ways to leverage social proof in business is through testimonials. Genuine feedback from clients, customers, or colleagues can speak volumes. If you've done a good job and people are happy with the results, encourage them to share their thoughts publicly. Their praise will act as social proof for future clients, helping you build credibility and trust. It's also important to recognize the power of influencers in today's world. Social media influencers, bloggers, and even industry leaders often serve as powerful agents of social proof. If they recommend a product, service, or idea, their followers are more likely to trust that recommendation because the influencer has already been validated by their audience. By associating yourself or your product with trusted individuals, you amplify your own social proof. But here's where it gets really interesting. Social proof isn't just about the quantity of people involved. It's also about the quality. It's not enough to simply have a large number of people supporting your idea. If your crowd is made up of people who are perceived as credible, respected, or similar to your audience, social proof becomes even more powerful. If you can show that industry experts, well-known figures, or people with similar characteristics to your target audience are already backing your idea, your chances of success increase significantly. For example, let's say you're pitching a new software to a company, and you can show that other companies in the same industry have already adopted it and are seeing great results. You've now created a sense of social proof by connecting your product to other businesses that the potential client respects and relates to. Social proof works best when it involves people that your target audience trusts and looks up to. Now, I want you to think about something in your own life. How often do you rely on social proof when making decisions? Whether it's choosing a restaurant, buying a product, or even deciding what movie to watch, social proof is constantly shaping our choices. It's one of those subtle forces that influences us, whether we're conscious of it or not. So the next time you're trying to persuade someone, whether it's to buy something, support an idea, or take action, remember that the more people you can show are already on board, the more likely others are to follow. And it's not just about numbers. It's about finding the right people who are respected, trusted, and seen as credible by your target audience. When you build social proof in an authentic and thoughtful way, it doesn't just increase your credibility. It helps you connect on a deeper level with the people who matter most. In the end, social proof is one of those psychological principles that we all respond to whether we realize it or not. It's woven into how we make decisions and how we engage with the world. By understanding and applying social proof, you can persuade others to follow your lead, trust your ideas, and take action. It's not about forcing anyone. It's about creating a sense of momentum and showing that others have already embraced what you're offering. And when you harness that power, you'll see how persuasive you can truly be. Have you ever heard someone say, if you want something done, give it to a busy person? You know the type. The person who's always juggling multiple projects, seemingly handling everything with ease. They're constantly in motion, yet they manage to get things done. We look at them and think, how do they do it? It's as if being busy and productive is a badge of honor. But here's the thing. It's not just about being busy. It's about commitment. When we commit to something, we create a psychological bond that makes us stick to our decisions regardless of how busy we get. This is where the principle of commitment and consistency becomes crucial in persuasion. Think about the last time you decided to do something, whether it was starting a new fitness routine, learning a new skill, or committing to a goal. You likely started with enthusiasm and energy, right? But as time went on, life got in the way. Your schedule became full, your motivation waned, and it felt like the initial excitement was fading. Here's where the principle of commitment comes in. The more we commit to something, the more likely we are to follow through. The simple act of committing to a goal or decision triggers a psychological need to be consistent with that commitment, even if circumstances change. Let's dive deeper. The principle of commitment and consistency is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. When we make a decision or take a stand on something, we want to be consistent with that decision, even if it's difficult. It's almost like our minds are hardwired to avoid cognitive dissonance, the discomfort that arises when our actions don't align with our beliefs or commitments. This is why, when we publicly commit to something, we're much more likely to follow through, whether it's a New Year's resolution, a work goal, or even a promise we've made to someone else. Now, think about how you've made decisions in the past. You might have started out with the best intentions, but when things got tough, it was easy to back off, right? Yet when you made a public commitment or told someone about your goal, you felt more accountable. It wasn't just about your own personal commitment. It was about the expectation that you would follow through because you had made a promise. The simple act of telling someone, I'm going to do this, creates a level of accountability that makes it harder to back out. Here's a classic example of commitment and consistency in action. Have you ever agreed to help a friend with something? Maybe a small favor, like running an errand or helping them move, and then found that once you agreed, it felt almost impossible to say no, even when you didn't really have the time. That's because once you commit to something, your brain wants to align your actions with that commitment, making it hard to backtrack. It's not just about being nice. It's about your internal desire to stay true to the commitment you made, even if it's inconvenient. This principle works in business too. If you can get someone to commit, even in small ways, you significantly increase your chances of persuading them to follow through on larger actions. For example, if you're trying to get a client to sign a contract, one effective strategy might be to first get them to agree to a smaller decision. Maybe it's a trial offer or a meeting to discuss their needs. That initial commitment makes them more likely to follow through with the larger commitment because they want to maintain consistency with what they've already agreed to. But let's take this even further. The foot in the door technique. This is a great strategy that taps directly into the commitment principle. Imagine you're trying to persuade someone to do something, but you know that asking for the big request right away might overwhelm them. Instead, you ask for a small favor or commitment first. It could be as simple as asking for a 5-minute conversation, or getting them to agree to a small action, like filling out a form. Once they've agreed to this smaller request, they're far more likely to agree to your larger request because they want to stay consistent with what they've already committed to. For example, let's say you're selling a product, but instead of going straight to the pitch, you ask a potential customer if they'd be willing to review a brochure. It's a small commitment. But once they agree to that, they're more likely to say yes when you ask them to purchase the product. The principle of commitment and consistency makes them feel that since they've already made a small commitment, they need to be consistent and follow through with a larger commitment. Another example comes from the realm of volunteering. Have you ever been asked to donate to a cause, and at first you were hesitant? Then someone asked if you'd be willing to make a small donation, even if it was just $5. You agreed, think it was no big deal. But after you made that small commitment, you felt more inclined to donate again later when asked for a larger amount. This is a foot in the door technique in action. By getting you to agree to a small action first, the organization makes it easier for you to commit to a larger action later. It works because of the psychological desire to stay consistent with our previous decisions. Here's the thing about commitment. It's not just about big decisions. It's about the small, seemingly insignificant commitments that we make every day. The more we commit to something, the more likely we are to act in a way that's consistent with that commitment. Whether it's committing to a fitness goal, a new habit, or even a decision we made at work, the principle of commitment and consistency affects our behavior more than we realize. And this doesn't just apply to our personal decisions. It also applies to how we persuade others. If you want to influence someone or get them on board with your ideas, start by getting them to make a small commitment. This small act of commitment will increase their willingness to follow through with bigger actions later on, whether it's getting them to sign up for a newsletter, take a brief survey, or agree to a small favor. The principle of commitment makes it easier for them to say yes when the bigger ask comes. Commitment and consistency are incredibly powerful forces. When people make decisions, they want to be consistent with those decisions, which is why it's so effective in persuasion. Once you commit, whether publicly or privately, it becomes harder to backtrack. This is true for both you and the people you're trying to persuade. The next time you're trying to influence someone, think about how you can use the principle of commitment. Can you get them to make a small commitment that will lead them to a larger one later? Can you introduce them to a concept or idea that aligns with their values, making it easier for them to commit to it? Whether you're persuading someone to support your project, make a purchase, or take action on an idea, commitment and consistency will be your secret weapon in ensuring they follow through. In the end, commitment isn't just about big decisions. It's about those small steps we take every day. The more we commit to something, the more our actions align with that commitment. Whether you're trying to persuade others or keep yourself on track, understand the power of commitment can help you make lasting, consistent changes, both personally and in your influence over others. Have you ever heard someone say, if you want something done, give it to a busy person? You know the type. The The person who's always juggling multiple projects, seemingly handling everything with ease. They're constantly in motion, yet they manage to get things done. We look at them and think, how do they do it? It's as if being busy and productive is a badge of honor. But here's the thing. It's not just about being busy. It's about commitment. When we commit to something, we create a psychological bond that makes us stick to our decisions, regardless of how busy we get. This is where the principle of commitment and consistency becomes crucial in persuasion. Think about the last time you decided to do something, whether it was starting a new fitness routine, learning a new skill, or committing to a goal. You likely started with enthusiasm and energy, right? But as time went on, life got in the way. Your schedule became full, your motivation waned, and it felt like the initial excitement was fading. Here's where the principle of commitment comes in. The more we commit to something, the more likely we are to follow through. The simple act of committing to a goal or decision triggers a psychological need to be consistent with that commitment, even if circumstances change. Let's dive deeper. The principle of commitment and consistency is one of the most powerful forces in human behavior. When we make a decision or take a stand on something, we want to be consistent with that decision, even if it's difficult. It's almost like our minds are hardwired to avoid cognitive dissonance, the discomfort that arises when our actions don't align with our beliefs or commitments. This is why, when we publicly commit to something, we're much more likely to follow through, whether it's a New Year's resolution, a work goal, or even a promise we've made to someone else. Now, think about how you've made decisions in the past. You might have started out with the best intentions, but when things got tough, it was easy to back off, right? Yet, when you made a public commitment or told someone about your goal, you felt more accountable. It wasn't just about your own personal commitment. It was about the expectation that you would follow through, because you had made a promise. The simple act of telling someone, I'm going to do this, creates a level of accountability that makes it harder to back out. Here's a classic example of commitment and consistency in action. Have you ever agreed to help a friend with something? Maybe a small favor, like running an errand or helping them move, and then found that once you agreed, it felt almost impossible to say no, even when you didn't really have the time. That's because once you commit to something, your brain wants to align your actions with that commitment, making it hard to backtrack. It's not just about being nice. It's about your internal desire to stay true to the commitment you made, even if it's inconvenient. This principle works in business, too. If you can get someone to commit, even in small ways, you significantly increase your chances of persuading them to follow through on larger actions. For example, if you're trying to get a client to sign a contract, one effective strategy might be to first get them to agree to a smaller decision. Maybe it's a trial offer or a meeting to discuss their needs. That initial commitment makes them more likely to follow through with the larger commitment because they want to maintain consistency with what they've already agreed to. But let's take this even further. The foot in the door technique. This is a great strategy that taps directly into the commitment principle. Imagine you're trying to persuade someone to do something, but you know that asking for the big request right away might overwhelm them. Instead, you ask for a small favor or commitment first. It could be as simple as asking for a 5-minute conversation or getting them to agree to a small action, like filling out a form. Once they've agreed to this smaller request, they're far more likely to agree to your larger request because they want to stay consistent with what they've already committed to. For example, let's say you're selling a product, but instead of going straight to the pitch, you ask a potential customer if they'd be willing to review a brochure. It's a small commitment. But once they agree to that, they're more likely to say yes when you ask them to purchase the product. The principle of commitment and consistency makes them feel that since they've already made a small commitment, they need to be consistent and follow through with the larger commitment. Another example comes from the realm of volunteering. Have you ever been asked to donate to a cause, and at first you were hesitant? Then someone asked if you'd be willing to make a small donation, even if it was just $5. You agreed, think it was no big deal. But after you made that small commitment, you felt more inclined to donate again later when asked for a larger amount. This is a foot in the door technique in action. By getting you to agree to a small action first, the organization makes it easier for you to commit to a larger action later. It works because of the psychological desire to stay consistent with our previous decisions. Here's the thing about commitment. It's not just about big decisions. It's about the small, seemingly insignificant commitments that we make every day. The more we commit to something, the more likely we are to act in a way that's consistent with that commitment. Whether it's committing to a fitness goal, a new habit, or even a decision we made at work, the principle of commitment and consistency affects our behavior more than we realize. And this doesn't just apply to our personal decisions. It also applies to how we persuade others. If you want to influence someone or get them on board with your ideas, start by getting them to make a small commitment. This small act of commitment will increase their willingness to follow through with bigger actions later on, whether it's getting them to sign up for a newsletter, take a brief survey, or agree to a small favor. The principle of commitment makes it easier for them to say yes when the bigger ask comes. Commitment and consistency are incredibly powerful forces. When people make decisions, they want to be consistent with those decisions, which is why it's so effective in persuasion. Once you commit, whether publicly or privately, it becomes harder to backtrack. This is true for both you and the people you're trying to persuade. The next time you're trying to influence someone, think about how you can use the principle of commitment. Can you get them to make a small commitment that will lead them to a larger one later? Can you introduce them to a concept or idea that aligns with their values, making it easier for them to commit to it? Whether you're persuading someone to support your project, make a purchase, or take action on an idea, commitment and consistency will be your secret weapon in ensuring they follow through. In the end, commitment isn't just about big decisions. It's about those small steps we take every day. The more we commit to something, the more our actions align with that commitment. Whether you're trying to persuade others or keep yourself on track, understanding the power of commitment can help you make lasting, consistent changes, both personally and in your influence over others. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you were trying to make a decision, but couldn't figure out which way to go? Maybe you were stuck between two options, both of which seemed appealing in their own way. You could feel the weight of your decision on your shoulders, but the more you thought about it, the harder it became to choose. You were overwhelmed by all the possibilities, and in the end, the decision just felt too difficult to make. This, my friend, is the power of the principle of contrast, one of the most persuasive forces in human decision-making. This principle works on the simple idea that when we're faced with multiple options, we're more likely to choose the one that stands out the most. It's the reason why we often make decisions based on comparison of two or more choices, rather than simply considering each option on its own. It's also why sometimes the smallest details can shift our decision-making process completely. Let's take a moment and think about a situation where you've been influenced by contrast. For example, imagine you're out shopping for a new pair of shoes. You walk into the store and spot two pairs that you like. One is priced at $60, while the other is $100. You might like both pairs, but something about the $60 pair seems a bit more appealing, doesn't it? Why? Because the $100 pair made the $60 pair seem like a much better deal. It's not that the $60 pair is inherently better. It's that the $100 pair made it look like the more affordable option. This is contrast at work. The difference in price made you view the $60 pair more favorably, even though it might have seemed like just another pair of shoes before you saw the more expensive one. This principle applies to nearly everything we buy, every decision we make, and even the way we perceive people. We're constantly comparing and contrasting, whether we're aware of it or not. But here's the catch. The principle of contrast doesn't just work for prices or products. It also works in how we influence others, how we make choices, and even how we persuade ourselves. Think about it. Have you ever been to a restaurant and been handed a menu with a high-priced item at the top? Maybe it was something you weren't planning on ordering, but by the time you reached the middle of the menu, the prices of the other dishes seem more reasonable in comparison. That's contrast in action. The high-priced item made everything else look more affordable, even though the prices might not have been drastically different. The perception of better value was created by comparison. When presented with something that's more expensive or extreme, everything else starts to seem more reasonable in comparison. In fact, this principle is so powerful that it's used by marketers and business owners all the time. They intentionally set up contrast to push customers towards certain decisions. Think about the last time you saw buy one, get one free offer. Without even thinking, you're making comparisons. You might start to consider buying the item, even though you didn't plan on purchasing it at all, simply because the deal looks like a better value compared to paying full price elsewhere. But the principle of contrast isn't just about what's visible in front of us. It can also play a huge role in influencing perceptions. Have you ever noticed how some people seem to rise above the crowd? You may have been in a room listening to a presentation, and the person in front of you wasn't necessarily giving the best advice, but their confidence in the way they presented themselves made them seem like the obvious choice. Why? Because they were contrasted with everyone else in the room. You were comparing them to others, and in that comparison, they stood out more, even though their actual value might have been on par with others. In social dynamics, the principal contrast can make someone appear more attractive or persuasive simply because they're positioned next to someone less favorable. This is why we sometimes feel more drawn to certain people, brands, or products. They're framed against something that seems less appealing. It's all about how we're wired to compare and contrast in order to make decisions. This principle of contrast can be incredibly useful when it comes to persuasion, especially in a business context. When you're trying to sell something, for instance, you can use contrast to make your offer stand out more clearly. Imagine you're selling a product, and you have 3 options for your clients: a basic option, a premium option, and a deluxe option. The basic option might be affordable but lacks certain features. The premium option is a good middle ground, and the deluxe option is high-end, complete with every feature imaginable. If you present the premium option in comparison to the deluxe, it suddenly seems much more reasonable, even though its price point might still be high. But because it's positioned next to the deluxe version, it feels like a much better deal. The same goes for everything from memberships to service packages. The positioning and comparison of different options can guide people toward the decision you want them to make. But contrast doesn't just affect big purchases or business decisions. It impacts every aspect of our daily lives. Think about it. When you're asked to pick a restaurant for dinner, you might feel overwhelmed by all the choices. But when you narrow it down to just 2 or 3 options, suddenly the decision becomes easier. You're comparing these 2 restaurants against one another, and that comparison helps you make your decision more easily. If you can learn to use contrast effectively in your own life, you'll start noticing how much more effective it can be in guiding your own decisions, and even in persuading others. One of the best ways to use the principle of contrast in persuasion is to present your offer, idea, or product in a way that makes it the most appealing option. You don't want to overwhelm someone with too many choices, but by offering just the right amount of options and making one of them appear superior by contrast, you create a scenario where the decision becomes a lot easier for the other person to make. It's all about guiding them through the decision-making process without them even realizing it. Let's take another look at this in terms of personal behavior. Have you ever felt inspired to do something, like work out, study, or take on a new challenge, because you saw someone else doing it first? Maybe you watched a friend's progress and thought, I can do that too. The principle of contrast can be applied to self-improvement as well. When you compare where you are to where you want to be, and see others who are already ahead of you, that contrast can motivate you to take action. It can push you to act simply because you see what's possible. Contrast can also be a huge influence when it comes to self-persuasion. Sometimes, we need to frame our own goals and choices in a way that highlights their value. If you're trying to decide whether to take on a new challenge, think about how you can compare the options in a way that makes the decision clearer. For example, if you're debating whether to dedicate time to a new skill, consider how learning that skill will positively impact your life compared to not learning it at all. That comparison, that contrast, can give you the motivation to commit to the change. Ultimately, the principle of contrast is a powerful force in persuasion, decision-making, and influence. By understanding how people make comparisons, whether consciously or unconsciously, you can guide their decisions and shape their perceptions in ways that align with your goals. Whether it's positioning a product, offering an idea, or influencing your own behavior, contrast can make everything easier to understand, more attractive, and ultimately more persuasive. So, the next time you're trying to make a decision or try and persuade someone else to act, think about how you can use contrast to your advantage. Present your choices in a way that makes the best option stand out and helps the decision feel more obvious. Because when it comes to influence, Sometimes it's not about making the best choice. It's about making the best choice appear clear through the power of contrast. Think back to a time when someone really wanted you to do something, but instead of just asking, they made you feel like it was your idea all along. It's almost as if they planted a seed in your mind, and suddenly you found yourself eager to agree. There was no pressure, no hard sell. It felt natural, like the decision was entirely your own. This, my friend, is the magic of reciprocity. And when it's used correctly, it's one of the most powerful forces in persuasion. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Reciprocity? Isn't that just about returning a favor? Well, yes, that's part of it. But reciprocity is much deeper than just giving and receiving. It's about creating a psychological exchange, a sense of mutual benefit. It's about the unspoken rules of human interaction that govern how we treat each other. We give to receive, and often the act of giving creates an invisible bond that makes us feel compelled to return the favor. Let me paint a picture for you. Imagine you're at a coffee shop and you just ordered your usual, a large cappuccino. The barista, who you've never met before, hands you the coffee and says, "It's on the house today. Just a little treat for you." At first, you might feel a little surprised, perhaps even confused. But then, as you take your first sip, you feel a sense of gratitude. You didn't ask for a free drink, but it was given to you without any expectation in return. Now, the next time you walk into that coffee shop, what do you think will happen? You'll probably be more inclined to go back, and maybe even spend a little more money than usual. Why? Because that small gesture created a feeling of obligation in you. You're now more likely to reciprocate the kindness. This is the principle of reciprocity at work. It's a fundamental human behavior that goes all the way back to our primal instincts. If someone does something for us, we feel an instinctive need to repay them. It doesn't matter if the favor is small or large. The act of giving makes us want to give back. The moment you're on the receiving end of favor or kindness, it creates an unspoken obligation to return it in some way. But here's the secret. It doesn't take much to trigger reciprocity. Sometimes, it's the smallest gestures that create the strongest feelings of obligation. Imagine you're having a conversation with a colleague at work, and they take a moment to listen to your idea, offering a few encouraging words. They don't offer much in terms of advice or action, but just the act of listening attentively can create a sense of reciprocity. The next time they ask for your help with something, you'll be more likely to say yes, simply because you feel that unspoken need to return the favor. That's the power of reciprocity. It's subtle, but it works. Now, let's look at how businesses, advertisers, and even influencers use the principle of reciprocity to persuade customers. Think about a time you signed up for a free trial or downloaded a free resource from a company. What happened next? If you're like most people, you were likely bombarded with follow-up emails or ads encouraging you to purchase a full version of the product or service. That's because the company knows that by giving you something for free, they've created a sense of obligation. You didn't ask for the free trial, they offered it to you. And now, there's a small psychological pressure for you to reciprocate by making a purchase. It's a brilliant tactic. By offering a gift or a small favor, companies tap into your sense of reciprocity and create an environment where you feel compelled to give back. And it works. Studies have shown that when people are given a free gift or offered something of value without expectation, they're far more likely to respond to a request or make a purchase later. Let's talk about how reciprocity works in influencing behavior. One of the most powerful uses of this principle is when it's used to influence decisions. If you want someone to do something for you, whether it's agreeing to a business deal, attending an event, or even making a purchase, the best way to get them to say yes is to offer something first. This doesn't mean giving away something big or expensive. Even a small act of kindness can trigger the need for reciprocity. It could be as simple as offering advice, providing valuable information, or even complimenting someone. The key is to give without expecting anything in return, and it's this generosity that often leads to a reciprocal action. Here's an example from personal life. Have you ever received an unexpected compliment from someone? Maybe it was a friend who noticed something about you that others hadn't. How did you feel in that moment? Good, right? But think about how you responded. Most likely, you either gave them a compliment in return or looked for ways to offer something back. That's how reciprocity works. It's a natural, instinctive response. And if you want to build trust, influence others, or persuade someone to take action, you can use reciprocity as a powerful tool. By being the first to give, whether it's your time, your attention, or a small favor, you make it easier for others to feel like they owe you something. And when they feel that sense of obligation, they're much more likely to say yes when you ask for something in return. But here's something important to consider. Reciprocity works best when it's genuine. People can sense when something is being offered just to get something in return. If your actions are purely transactional, they'll feel forced, and the other person will resist the urge to reciprocate. The beauty of reciprocity is in the genuine spirit of giving. When you offer something from a place of authenticity, whether it's your time, your help, or just your attention, it creates a connection. And that connection is the foundation of trust. In fact, authenticity is what makes reciprocity so powerful. People want to feel like you're giving without strings attached. When you give, it should come from a place of kindness, not manipulation. If you can give without any expectation of return, you create an environment where the other person feels genuinely compelled to reciprocate, not out of obligation, but out of a desire to maintain the positive relationship. That's when reciprocity works its magic. Let's shift gears for a moment and think about how you can use reciprocity to persuade others in your own life. Whether you're trying to get someone to buy into your idea, join your cause, or even just help you with a project, the first step is to offer something of value. Maybe it's your time, maybe it's valuable feedback, or maybe it's just showing genuine interest in their goals and needs. By giving first, you create a sense of goodwill, and when you ask for something in return, it feels like a natural next step, not a hard sell. But don't just think about how you can use reciprocity to get others to help you. Think about how it can work for you personally. When you build a habit of giving, whether it's offering help, offering compliments, or offering your time, you create a network of people who feel that unspoken obligation to support you in return. Whether it's in business or personal relationships, being the one to give first creates a ripple effect that brings positive energy back into your life. Reciprocity is one of the most subtle yet powerful principles in human behavior. It's a tool that works both on a personal level and in business, marketing, and social dynamics. By understanding how reciprocity works and using it in your life, you can build stronger relationships, influence others more effectively, and create a cycle of kindness and cooperation that benefits everyone involved. And remember, the key is to give genuinely and without expectation. When you do that, the universe has a way of returning the favor in ways you couldn't have predicted. So, the next time you want to persuade someone, think about what you can offer first. It's not just about getting something back. It's about creating an environment of mutual support and trust, and that's where the real power of reciprocity lies. Have you ever felt the pull of an idea, a product, or an opportunity and thought, I have to act on this now before it's gone? It's that feeling of urgency, the kind that makes you want to jump into something immediately, almost as if time is running out. That, my friend, is the power of scarcity. It's one of the most persuasive principles in psychology, and when used right, it can significantly influence decisions and actions. Think about it. When something is scarce or limited in availability, we automatically begin to perceive it as more valuable. It's a psychological response that has been shaped over centuries. If something is rare, it must be special, right? There's an innate part of us that gets triggered by the fear of missing out, FOMO, which leads us to take action faster. This is where scarcity becomes a powerful tool in persuasion. Let's take a step back for a moment and think about a time when you've experienced scarcity. Have you ever been to a concert or event where tickets were selling fast? Or maybe you've seen an online sale where the items were almost gone or limited edition? What did you do in that situation? More than likely, you felt a rush of urgency to secure the item, even though you might not have needed it immediately. The scarcity principle made you feel like you needed to act quickly before you missed out. This is the core of how scarcity influences decisions. It works because when people perceive something as limited, whether it's a product, an opportunity, or even a moment in time, they feel like they have to act fast. That urgency creates a psychological pressure to not let the chance slip away. And often, that's all it takes to persuade someone to make a decision they otherwise might have taken more time to consider. But why does scarcity have such a strong influence on us? It's rooted in human survival instincts. Think about the early days of humanity. Resources, whether food, shelter, or mates, were limited. If we didn't act fast to secure what we needed, we risked going without. Over time, that deep-seated need to act quickly when resources were scarce became ingrained in us. Even today, when we encounter something that seems in short supply, our brains are still wired to treat it as more valuable, because in our evolutionary past, scarcity equated to survival. This is why limited time offers, countdown clocks on websites, and limited availability products are so effective. They trigger that primal instinct to seize the opportunity before it's gone. It's not just about the value of the product itself. It's about the perceived value created by the scarcity surrounding it. Let's talk about how scarcity is often used in marketing and sales. Think about an online store that advertises only 3 left in stock for a popular item. That simple statement triggers the scarcity principle in your mind, and suddenly, that item becomes more desirable. Even if you weren't planning to buy it before, the message that the item is almost gone forces you to make a decision faster. You might even make the purchase based on urgency rather than need. This is scarcity at work. Another way scarcity is used is through limited time offers. We've all seen flash sales, right? You're scrolling through your favorite shopping site, and suddenly you're hit with banners saying, 24-hour flash sale, everything 50% off. Even if you weren't planning to buy anything, the idea that the sale will disappear in just a few hours creates a sense of urgency that pushes you to make a purchase. And the thing is, it works. That pressure to act quickly triggers a psychological response where you feel compelled to act before the opportunity vanishes. But scarcity doesn't just apply to products and services. It can be a persuasive tool in personal relationships, too. Think about a time when someone made themselves scarce in your life. Maybe they didn't always return your calls or seem to have their attention elsewhere. Suddenly, their presence seemed more valuable, didn't it? When we sense that someone or something is unavailable or in limited supply, we tend to value it more. This is why absence can sometimes make the heart grow fonder. The scarcity of their time or attention effectively makes it more precious. If in the same way, scarcity as persuasion, when you position yourself as someone who doesn't always say service yes or even a social request or offer your time to everyone who asks, if you falsely make people value that something is in limited supply, people tend to respect boundaries. People will catch on quickly. You make yourself scarce, and it will undermine the effectiveness of your time and presence become more in demand. Scarcity works because it's perceived as genuine. So if you fake it, it won't have the same impact. For example, if you're offering a special promotion or event, make sure the time or availability is truly limited. When people know that the offer is genuine, they're more likely to take action because they believe the opportunity is real. If they sense that they can always come back for the same deal later, the sense of urgency will fade and they'll be less likely to act. Let's look at a real-world example of scarcity being used for social influence. Have you ever heard of the phrase limited edition? Whether the limited edition product, a limited time event, or a special exclusive offer, we naturally feel more inclined to value it because it's rare. Limited editions become a status symbol because they suggest that not everyone has access to them. When something is scarce, we desire it more because we want to be part of an exclusive group. Scarcity also plays a role in political campaigns and public opinion. If a political candidate presents themselves as a rare leader with unique qualities, people often feel more inclined to support them, especially if they frame their candidacy as an exclusive opportunity. The idea that there's a limited time to make a decision or act creates urgency, which can influence a person's behavior in subtle but powerful ways. Now, let's talk about creating scarcity for yourself. You don't need to rely on others to create the feeling of scarcity in your life. You can create it yourself to motivate your own actions. Let's say you want to complete a big project, but you're feeling overwhelmed. What if you frame the opportunity in terms of scarcity? You could set a deadline for yourself that's firm and non-negotiable. You could tell people around you that you'll be unavailable for a certain period because you're focused on a time-sensitive goal. By creating that sense of scarcity for your time, you build urgency and motivation to follow through. Similarly, if you want to achieve a personal goal, create scarcity around the resources you need to get there. Limit your access to distractions or unnecessary commitments. Create a window of time where you're entirely focused on that one goal. The idea that there's only a limited window to achieve something can motivate you to act quickly and decisively. Scarcity is one of those subtle yet powerful principles in persuasion. It taps into our innate desire to act when we perceive something as rare or limited. Whether it's used in marketing, in relationships, or even in our own personal motivations, scarcity works because it leverages our fear of missing out on something valuable. So, the next time you try and persuade someone or even motivate yourself, think about how you can introduce scarcity into the situation. Whether it's offering a limited time opportunity, setting a deadline, or creating a sense of exclusivity, scarcity can be a powerful tool to influence behavior and drive action. The key is authenticity. When scarcity is real, it has the power to push people into making decisions quickly and with confidence. Have you ever been in a conversation with someone who just seemed to have a way with words? You know the type. The ones who can explain their ideas in such a clear and compelling way that you can't help but agree with them. You find yourself nodding along, thinking, yes, that makes so much sense. You're not just hearing what they say, you're feeling it. Almost like they're tapping into your emotions. It's almost like they've unlocked the secret to making their message resonate with you on a deeper level. This is where the power of language comes in. Language isn't just a tool for communication. It's one of the most effective tools for persuasion. The way we speak, the words we use, and the way we frame our ideas can dramatically affect how people perceive us and how likely they are to take action based on what we say. Let's start by thinking about how words shape our perception. Have you ever noticed that the way something is phrased can totally change how you feel about it? For example, if you're told that something is on sale for a limited time, that creates a sense of urgency. You immediately start thinking, I need to act fast before I miss out. But if you're simply told, this is a special offer, it doesn't feel as urgent. The same concept is being communicated, but the language used makes a huge difference in how you respond. One word, limited, creates that sense of scarcity that triggers a powerful emotional response. This is how powerful language can be. It shapes our thoughts, guides our emotions, and influences our decisions, often without us even realizing it. The words we choose can open doors or close them. They can create connection, evoke trust, or drive a wedge between us and others. Now, think about the way you use language in your own life. When you're trying to persuade someone, whether it's a friend, a colleague, or a client, how you present your ideas can make all the difference. Imagine you're presenting a new proposal at work. You can say, this is a great opportunity, or you can say, this is a game-changing opportunity that will improve our results and set us apart from competitors. The second phrasing not only highlights the potential of the proposal, but also emphasizes urgency and importance. The language you use frames a message and influences how people perceive its value. One of the most effective techniques in persuasive language is the use of framing. Framing is the art of presenting information in a way that highlights certain aspects while downplaying others. It's about shaping how the audience sees something. For example, let's say you're talking about a new project. If you frame it as a chance for growth rather than a challenging change, the perception shifts from something potentially difficult to something exciting and beneficial. By carefully choosing a language, you're essentially guiding how people view the situation, making them more likely to respond positively. A great example of framing comes from the world of advertising. Think about all the slogans and phrases we see on TV or hear on the radio. Brands know that the way they frame their product can dramatically change how consumers feel about it. Take the phrase, now with more vitamins. It's a simple change from same old product, but it creates perception that the product is somehow better, healthier, and worth considering. The product hasn't changed. It's the language around it that has made it more appealing. And then there's the power of storytelling. Have you ever been told a story that just captivated you? Maybe it was a personal anecdote, a historical tale, or even a fictional story, but whatever it was, it made you feel something. Whether that was excitement, sadness, inspiration, or even a desire to take action. That's the power of narrative. Humans are wired for stories. Our brains process stories in a way that engages both our logical and emotional centers, making them one of the most effective tools for persuasion. When you tell a story, you're not just giving information. You're creating an experience. You're painting a picture that allows the listener to see the world through your eyes. This emotional connection makes it much easier for people to empathize with your message and be persuaded by it. Think about how many successful brands use storytelling in their marketing campaigns. Whether it's the story of how the company started or the journey of a customer who experienced transformation through a product, storytelling makes the brand feel more personal, more relatable. It connects with people's emotions, making them more likely to buy into the idea being presented. But here's something that's often overlooked: how your language makes people feel. The tone, choice of words, and phrasing you use can either build rapport or create a disconnect. Have you ever had a conversation where someone's words just didn't resonate with you? Maybe it was their tone of voice, their choice of words, or the way they structured their argument that made it hard to follow or relate to them. On the flip side, think about a time when someone spoke in a way that made you feel understood, respected, and connected. Their words resonated with you, didn't they? You were much more likely to be persuaded by what they said because they had engaged you emotionally. That's the power of empathetic language. When you speak in a way that acknowledges the other person's feelings and perspective, you make them feel heard. This creates trust and opens a door for more effective persuasion. Instead of being pushy or demanding, empathetic language invites collaboration and mutual understanding. It's about using words that reflect empathy, whether through active listening, validating emotions, or simply showing that you understand their perspective. In addition to empathy, language can also play a role in creating authority. When you speak with confidence, use clear, assertive language, and frame your ideas in a way that conveys expertise, you position yourself as someone others want to listen to. Think about a leader you admire, the way they speak, whether how they present themselves in meetings or how they inspire others, often plays a big role in their ability to influence. People trust confident, authoritative figures because they exude a sense of certainty and competence. So, when you want to persuade, don't just rely on the facts. Make sure your words project authority and confidence. Here's something to think about. What if you could use language to shift someone's mindset entirely? Imagine you're talking to someone who's on the fence about making a decision. You could approach them with all the logical arguments in the world. But what if instead you ask them a simple question like, what would it feel like to have this resolved? Or what would be the impact on your life if this didn't happen? By framing the conversation in terms of feelings and consequences, you engage their emotions, prompting them to see the situation from a different perspective. This type of language can shift someone's thinking in a way that logic alone may not achieve. Finally, let's not forget the power of positive reinforcement. People are naturally drawn to things that make them feel good. When you speak positively, whether you're praising someone's efforts or framing your message in an uplifting way, you're making it easier for people to engage with your ideas. Instead of focusing on what could go wrong, highlight the possibilities and potential outcomes. When people feel encouraged, they're more likely to take action and move forward. Positive language fosters an optimistic outlook, making persuasion feel less like a push and more like an invitation to act. In the end, the power of language in persuasion is undeniable. The words you use shape the way people perceive you, your ideas, and the choices they make. By mastering the art of language, whether through framing, storytelling, or empathetic communication, you can influence others in ways that feel natural and authentic. Remember, words are not just tools for transmitting information. They're powerful instruments for creating connection, building trust, and motivating action. So, the next time you need to persuade someone, think about how your words are shaping the conversation. Are they creating urgency, building rapport, evoking emotion? When you learn to use language effectively, you'll unlock the true power of persuasion and change the way others respond to you. Have you ever noticed how sometimes the more you push for something, the more resistance you get? Whether it's asking someone for a favor, trying to convince a friend to go to a movie, or even persuading a colleague to back your idea, the harder you push, the more they seem to pull away. You're being direct and you know what you want. But why does it feel like the more you try, the less you're able to get it? This, my friend, is a principle of reactance, one of the most powerful psychological forces that often works against us when we're trying to persuade. It's that instinctive feeling of resistance we get when we perceive our freedom of choice or autonomy is being threatened. When we feel like someone is trying to control us or force us into a decision, we often react by pushing back. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're trying to convince a friend to come with you to a new restaurant you've been dying to try. You've mentioned it several times, and each time they seem to resist a little more. The more you insist, the more they dig their heels in and say, I don't know. I'm not feeling it today. Now, if you were to casually say, no worries, maybe some other time, something strange might happen. They might suddenly turn around and say, okay, I'll go with you this time. The more you try to control the situation, the more likely they are to resist. But by stepping back and giving them space, you actually increase the likelihood of them agreeing. That's reactance at work. We have this innate desire to maintain control over our decisions. And when we feel pushed, we often act out in the opposite direction. It's not necessarily that we don't want the thing. It's that we don't want to be told we have to want it. This idea of reactance is deeply ingrained in human behavior. Think about it. If someone tells you, you must do this, or you have to choose this option, your immediate reaction might be to do the opposite. Even if, logically, it's the right thing for you, just the fact that it's being imposed on you can trigger resistance. It's the feeling that your personal freedom is being taken away, and we hate that feeling. But how can you use this to your advantage when you're trying to persuade? The trick is in offering choice. Instead of telling someone what they should do, offer them options and let them make the decision themselves. When we feel like we have control over our choices, we're much more likely to make a decision and follow through on it. For example, imagine you're trying to convince someone to join a meeting or an event. Instead of saying, you should come to this meeting tomorrow, it's really important. Try saying something like, I'm going to a meeting tomorrow and it would be great if you could join. But if not, no worries. I'll keep you in the loop. This way, you've given them the choice to decide. They may feel less pressured, and paradoxically, they may feel more inclined to say yes because they feel in control. This doesn't just apply to personal relationships. Reactance is something that shows up in marketing and sales all the time. How many times have you encountered a sales pitch that felt a bit too pushy, where the salesperson kept emphasizing, you need this. This is the best option for you. Don't wait. How did that make you feel? Probably a bit overwhelmed or even a little resistant, right? That's reactance. The moment a salesperson tries to take away your ability to make your own choice, you instinctively want to push back. Now, consider the opposite approach. Many successful marketers and salespeople will emphasize the benefits of their product and then offer choices without making you feel obligated. It's not you must buy this, but rather, this could really help you, and here's some great options that you can choose from. By giving people freedom to decide, you're much more likely to get them to say yes, because they feel empowered in the decision-making process. Reactance is a powerful force, but it's also something that can be turned to your advantage. The key is to be aware of how it operates and use it in a way that leads to cooperation, not resistance. When you're persuading someone, always remember, instead of forcing them into a decision, offer them the autonomy to make the choice themselves. By doing so, you'll not only reduce resistance, but you'll also build trust and create a more collaborative environment. Another common example of reactance occurs in parent-child relationships. We've all heard a parent say, you have to clean your room, and we can practically hear the resistance in the child's response, whether spoken or unspoken. Now, imagine the parent says, I know you've got a lot on your plate, but if you have time later, I'd really appreciate it if you could tidy up your room. By removing the feeling of being told what to do and offering the child the ability to choose when to take action, they feel less controlled and more motivated to clean their room, simply because they can decide for themselves when it gets done. Reactance can also be seen in advertising. When a company heavily advertises limited-time offers, they are banking on scarcity and urgency, but if they push it too hard, it can backfire. People don't like being rushed, and if the feeling of urgency becomes overwhelming, they might pull away altogether. But if the offer is presented as a potential opportunity, rather than a you must act now pitch, people will feel more comfortable taking the time to consider the decision on their terms. Offering autonomy in the decision-making process allows people to feel less pressured, which makes them more likely to act in a way that benefits both parties. Another interesting way that reactance shows up is in social situations. Ever had a conversation where someone was trying to push their opinion on you? Maybe it was a friend, family member, or colleague, and the more they insisted, the more you started to resist their point of view, even if, deep down, you knew they were probably right. The more you're told, this is the way it is, the more you'll want to disagree, even if your initial stance was more neutral. This is reactance again, the urge to assert your autonomy and defend your perspective. The key takeaway here is to give others a sense of control. Whether you're trying to persuade someone in business, in a personal relationship, or in any other area of life, offering choice and autonomy is crucial. The more you can make someone feel like they are making the decision themselves, the more likely they are to follow through. So, how do you use reactance strategically in persuasion? First, recognize that people are hardwired to resist being told what to do. Offer choices, not ultimatums. Frame your suggestions as opportunities rather than obligations. And always remember, the more control you give others in the decision-making process, the more likely they are to say yes. Reactance is a powerful force, but it's also something that can be turned to your advantage. The key is to be aware of how it operates and use it in a way that leads to cooperation, not resistance. When you're persuading someone, always remember, instead of forcing them into a decision, offer them the autonomy to make the choice themselves. By doing so, you'll not only reduce resistance, but you'll also build trust and create a more collaborative environment. Another common example of reactance occurs in parent-child relationships. We've all heard a parent say, "You have to clean your room," and we can practically hear the resistance in the child's response, whether spoken or unspoken. Now, imagine the parent says, "I know you've got a lot on your plate, but if you have time later, I'd really appreciate it if you could tidy up your room." By removing the feeling of being told what to do and offering the child the ability to choose when to take action, they feel less controlled and more motivated to clean their room, simply because they can decide for themselves when it gets done. Reactance can also be seen in advertising. When a company heavily advertises limited time offers, they are banking on scarcity and urgency, but if they push it too hard, it can backfire. People don't like being rushed, and if the feeling of urgency becomes overwhelming, they might pull away altogether. But if the offer is presented as a potential opportunity, rather than a "you must act now" pitch, people will feel more comfortable taking the time to consider the decision on their terms. Offering autonomy in the decision-making process allows people to feel less pressured, which makes them more likely to act in a way that benefits both parties. Another interesting way that reactance shows up is in social situations. Ever had a conversation where someone was trying to push their opinion on you? Maybe it was a friend, family member, or colleague, and the more they insisted, the more you started to resist their point of view, even if deep down you knew they were probably right. The more you're told, "This is the way it is," the more you'll want to disagree, even if your initial stance was more neutral. This is reactance again, the urge to assert your autonomy and defend your perspective. The key takeaway here is to give others a sense of control. Whether you're trying to persuade someone in business, in a personal relationship, or in any other area of life, offering choice and autonomy is crucial. The more you can make someone feel like they are making the decision themselves, the more likely they are to follow through. So, how do you use reactance strategically in persuasion? First, recognize that people are hardwired to resist being told what to do. Offer choices, not ultimatums. Frame your suggestions as opportunities rather than obligations. And always remember, the more control you give others in the decision-making process, the more likely they are to say yes. Reactance can feel like a barrier when you're trying to influence someone, but with the right approach, it can be a powerful tool to foster collaboration, trust, and ultimately influence. By reducing resistance and empowering others to make their own decisions, you'll not only persuade them more effectively, but also build a deeper, more respectful relationship in the process. Have you ever been in a situation where you wanted to influence someone, but no matter what you said, they just didn't seem to get it? You could see the logic behind your point, but they just weren't on the same page. It's frustrating, isn't it? You're giving them all the facts, all the details, and still they're hesitant or resistant. Why does this happen? The answer is the power of emotions. When it comes to persuasion, emotions often trump logic. We like to think of ourselves as logical, rational beings, but the truth is, our emotions drive most of the decisions we make. People don't always buy products or take action because it makes sense. They do it because it feels right to them. And this is where emotional appeal becomes one of the most powerful tools in persuasion. Think back to a time when you made a decision that you later realized wasn't entirely logical. Maybe it was buying a new outfit you didn't need, or choosing to take a risk that didn't make sense at the time. The decision didn't make perfect logical sense, but it felt right. That was your emotions guiding you. In fact, many of our decisions, big or small, are based on emotions, not logic. If you can tap into the emotional side of persuasion, you can guide people's decisions in ways that logic alone never could. Let's talk about how emotions influence decisions. Have you ever walked into a store and something about the atmosphere made you feel excited or happy? Maybe it was the music, the lighting, or the way the products were displayed. But whatever it was, it created a positive emotional experience that made you want to buy. Even if you didn't need anything, your emotions made you feel like this was an opportunity you couldn't pass up. This is a great example of how emotions are woven into the fabric of persuasive environments. When you engage people's emotions, you engage their decision-making process. It's not just about presenting facts and figures. It's about creating a feeling that aligns with the decision you want them to make. Whether it's excitement, joy, security, or even fear, emotions can drive action like nothing else. Here's an example you might recognize. Think about advertising. If you've ever seen a commercial for a charity asking for donations, you know they don't just show you the statistics. They show you stories. They show you real people, real emotions, real struggles. This isn't just about presenting the problem. It's about making you feel the problem. It taps into your empathy and creates a desire to help, not because you logically understand the issue, but because you emotionally connect with it. And it works. Studies show that people are far more likely to donate or take action when they feel emotionally connected to a cause or a person. A few heart-wrenching images or an emotional story can compel us to act, even if it doesn't make the most logical sense. That's the power of emotional appeal. Now, let's talk about creating emotional appeal in your own persuasive efforts. How can you use this in your conversations, presentations, or negotiations? It starts by recognizing that emotions drive decisions. Whether you're pitching an idea, trying to sell something, or even trying to get someone to agree with your point of view, you need to connect with their emotions. People are more likely to take action when they feel something about what you're saying. For example, if you're trying to get someone on board with your proposal at work, you could focus on practical benefits, how the project will increase efficiency, cut costs, or improve results. But you could take a step further. You could also appeal to their emotions by focusing on how the project will make their job easier or more rewarding, how it will improve their day-to-day experience, or how it will positively affect the team. By connecting with their emotions, whether it's a sense of accomplishment, pride, or excitement, you make it easier for them to say yes. So, how do you build emotional appeal into your messaging? It starts by understanding your audience's values and emotional triggers. What do they care about? What makes them feel good or bad? What motivates them to act? By understanding these emotional drivers, you can craft a message that speaks to their deepest needs and desires. Another way to build emotional appeal is to use stories. We're wired to connect with stories. People often remember stories far longer than they remember facts and figures. When you tell a story, you engage both the logical and emotional parts of the brain, making it more likely that your message will stick. Whether you're telling a personal anecdote, a customer success story, or even a hypothetical scenario, stories tap into emotions and make your message more relatable. Finally, authenticity matters when creating emotional appeal. People can sense when emotions are being manipulated. If you're not genuine in your approach, your emotional appeal won't be effective. The best persuasive communicators are those who are genuinely passionate about what they're offering. Their enthusiasm, sincerity, and emotional connection to their message make it easier for others to connect with it as well. As we've explored throughout this journey, persuasion isn't just about clever words, facts, or statistics. It's about understanding human nature and tapping into psychology that drives decision-making. Whether it's creating urgency with scarcity, using emotional appeal to make your message resonate, or understanding the powerful role of reciprocity, the principles of persuasion work best when they align with how people naturally think and feel. At its core, persuasion is about connection. It's about engaging others in a way that makes them feel heard, understood, and respected. It's not about pushing people into decisions, but guiding them toward a choice that feels right to them. When you learn to tap into the emotional and psychological triggers that influence behavior, persuasion becomes more than a technique. It becomes a natural extension of your communication style, one that creates lasting trust and meaningful change. In both personal and professional life, The ability to persuade effectively can change the way you navigate challenges, build relationships, and achieve your goals. It's not about manipulation or forcing others to act against their will. It's about creating an environment where others feel motivated to act in ways that are mutually beneficial. By applying the principles we've discussed, from reciprocity and emotional appeal to framing and creating autonomy, you can influence decisions, foster cooperation, and encourage action in a way that feels authentic and empowering. The power of persuasion lies in understanding that people don't just respond to what you say. They respond to how you make them feel, what you make them believe, and the connections you help them make in their own minds. As you move forward, remember that persuasion isn't a one-time act. It's a continuous process. Whether you're working with a team, presenting an idea, or navigating personal relationships, your ability to connect, empathize, and communicate effectively will determine the level of influence you have. So, embrace the art of persuasion, not as a tool of manipulation, but as a way to create positive change, foster collaboration, and inspire action. In the end, the most effective persuaders are those who can meet people where they are, understand their needs, and communicate in a way that is clear, respectful, and emotionally engaging. Master that, and you'll not only persuade others, you'll build meaningful, lasting connections that will propel you toward success in every area of your life.